Welcome back to the Waco Family Medicine Point of Care Ultrasound curriculum. In our last session, we talked about some of the conventions of point of care ultrasound. We talked about how to place the patient, the provider, and the machine in the correct positions so that you can get appropriate images without straining or trying too hard to reach all of the different places that you'll need. We talked about which probe you should use for which type of exam and what presets were available on the machine for you to utilize. We talked about imaging modalities, including B mode, M mode, the Doppler modes, and helped understand when you might choose one of those different modalities to help differentiate a particular phenomenon in the human body. We talked about Doppler ultrasound and understood how we can utilize that to measure velocity. We used the conventions of orientation and image optimization to understand how we can make adjustments on the machine settings to help us get the best images possible. And then we talked a little bit about the medical, legal, and regulatory landscape pertinent to POCUS at the time of recording. Today we're going to talk about knobology. Now I'm not sure if this is a real word or not, but it is commonly used in ultrasound to talk about how you get the machine to do what you want it to do. So like all simple machines, ultrasound is no exception. It's something that we just intuitively understand, right? Not quite. Let's start with something easy. How do you turn the machine on and off? With the on-off button up in the corner. Perfect. So let's talk about starting an exam. The first thing to know is that you're not always going to need to set up a formal exam for a patient. This really only applies if you are going to be saving the images, and there's a few specific scenarios when I need you to do that. So, only enter patient info and save the images if you are logging the exam to your portfolio, meaning you want to get credit for it in your overall exam list. You are using the exam to make formal changes to the management plan. So if you're doing a dating ultrasound, for example, and this is the initial dating that we're going off of and we don't anticipate getting another scan, that would be sort of important for us to document. And then if you're billing for the scan in any way, whether it's for an ultrasound guided procedure or as we get our POCUS clinic up and running, if you're going to be billing for an ultrasound diagnostic exam, we need to save those images. But if you're just pulling out the ultrasound to see if you can get the same dating, you just need to take a look at something to see if it's a cyst or if it's just an area of induration. If you are just looking for fetal heart tones and not necessarily using that to change your management, it's okay for you to just pull up a blank patient profile, gather a couple of images, and then delete those images before the end of the day. That's totally fine. Using these two buttons on the left is how you're going to set up your patient in your exam. Starting with the patient button will pull up a menu, and in that menu you can fill out the MRN of the patient, their name, first and last, date of birth, their sex, and then if you remember, try to include your last name or your initials in the performing blank there. If not, you can always just type this in as a label somewhere on the exam, just so that we know who conducted the ultrasound. And then the exam button to the right will pull up a menu where you see all of the different probes that are connected to the machine. You can use the cursor to select which probe type you're wanting to use, and then choose the preset pertinent to whatever type of imaging you're going to be doing. And then you can use the keyboard to label the image, and off you go. We talked in our last lecture about the different types of ultrasound modes, including B mode and M mode and color mode. All of those are going to be located here on the left side of the keyboard. Now there's a few other options too, so you'll see a button that says Doppler. This is not the type of, it is Doppler, but it's a different type than color Doppler and power Doppler. So just know that these are four that I've circled are going to be the four most common that we utilize. And then as you do more advanced technique, you may start using pulse wave Doppler, continuous Doppler, and those kinds of other buttons over there. So B stands for B mode, obviously, M for M mode, color for color, and then PDI is that power Doppler that doesn't show you direction of flow, but it does show you low flow. That's what we talked about in our last lecture. Let's talk about adjusting the gain. So we have two ways to do that on this machine. First is the overall gain, which is this gain wheel at the bottom left-hand corner of the keyboard. And turning this to the right will make the gain increase overall, and then turning it to the left will decrease. There's also an auto button in the middle, which you can press, that uses some calculation to sort of magically set the setting to be what they consider to be most optimal. And then from there, you can adjust it manually. Now, we talked also about this idea of time gain compensation, or that sometimes you might want to decrease the gain in the far portion of the screen to minimize things like posterior acoustic enhancement, or perhaps due to attenuation, you need to actually increase the gain at the bottom of the screen because you've lost that signal. And you can do that with these sliders located on the upper left-hand portion of the keyboard. This is the time gain compensation, and it allows you to adjust the gain at specific depths. Speaking of depth, we also need to know how to zoom in on deeper structures or things like that, and that's using this other wheel on the right-hand side of the keyboard that's labeled depth. This also adjusts certain measurement tools that you will get into when we're looking at specifically OB applications of point-of-care ultrasound. Focus number and position. This is a setting you won't change very frequently, but when you do, it's useful to know that those settings are located up here. Usually this knob, although sometimes it changes to some of the other knobs along the menu at the top of the keyboard. These will have little labels on the screen right above each button, and then selecting and turning those knobs helps you utilize the options that come up in each of those drop-down menus. Sometimes you'll need to use the larger menu, which is over here on the right. This is menu select, and then utilizing the keyboard, you can scroll through those options, but we'll show you how to do that in person. To make measurements, you can use these three buttons. First, the measurement and the scroll roller bar. So measure will usually pull up a menu based on what exam type you've chosen and give you some commonly measured options in there. And you can use the roller and the cursor to select that, or to move your cursor around and then press enter to be able to record the ends of each of the item that you're measuring. Last, let's talk about saving images. So saving images is important, especially if we're going to be billing for them and needing to save them. Freeze will freeze the screen, but it's super important to remember that freeze does not store the image permanently. So if you're trying to identify a structure, you think you see it and then it's gone, press freeze and you can scroll back a couple seconds and look and see if that was what you needed. And if it is, then you can make some measurements and things like that, but freeze does not store the image. You have to press P1. P1, all of the P's on the right-hand side stand for print, and print 1 is what our machine sets up to store the image permanently. You have to press this or all your work is lost, and I can't tell you how many times myself, even a veteran of ultrasound and veteran of these machines, has forgotten to press that or pressed it in the wrong sequence, and unfortunately I've lost a lot of images that way. So you can press freeze for a still image and then P1 to store still. Or if you're recording a video, you can press P1 and it'll record the next few seconds of your ultrasound scan. And then lastly, to end an exam and save everything into that patient profile you created at the very beginning, you click End Exam, which is up here at the top of the keyboard. This will save everything, close it out, and get you ready to start on your next patient. That was a crash course into our particular ultrasound machines that we utilize here at Waco Family Medicine. Now we also use the butterfly system, and every now and then you'll see that some of these settings might be a little bit different. And then at the hospitals, we utilize different machines. However, this is a good reminder of the basic functions, and with practice you should be able to recognize and utilize all of the different machines with which you'll be working during your time in residency. So, from Doppler and me, happy scanning, and we'll pick up in Module 2 when we'll begin our journey into the world of OB point-of-care ultrasound. We'll see you then.